Welcome to the Cultivating Business Growth podcast, bringing you bi-weekly discussions designed to help you grow your business and create the lifestyle you desire. Elevate your business with proven strategies from virtual CFOs, CPAs, and business advisors. We discuss real-world challenges solved with actionable steps that get you the results you need both in business and building the life you deserve.
Welcome to episode number 176 of the Cultivating Business Growth podcast, brought to you by Willow Virtual CFO. As businesses grow, HR risk and compliance can feel overwhelming. Today, we'll talk about how to avoid pitfalls and why outsourcing HR is a smart option for many business owners. I'm Katina Peters, your host today on the Cultivating Business Growth podcast, and we're joined today by Andrea Herron, the CEO of Focus HR. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So Andrea brings over 2 decades of HR leadership experience, helping organizations of all sizes navigate the people side of growth, a very important part. And Focus HR, she and her team specialize in guiding businesses through compliance, risk management, building HR foundations that actually support long-term success. Her passion is making HR approachable and strategic, so business owners can grow confidently without the fear of hidden pitfalls. We're excited to dive into how outsourcing HR can minimize risk and set companies up for sustainable growth. So let's start out with learning a little bit about you and Focus HR. So just kind of backing up, what led you to start Focus HR and what kind of gap did you see in the market that, you got interested in starting that?
I started it almost 20 years ago. And actually it was very simple. I wanted to keep working when I started having children. So it was a way for me to do that. That's why I started it, because somehow new baby, new business made sense. And the reason I decided to focus on small business is because I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, going back to my great-grandmother. And I've just seen that small business gets picked on, because they don't know what they're supposed to do or not do. And I just thought that was crazy and not right. And I wanted to fix that. And I also saw that if you don't fix it when you're a little bit smaller, the growth becomes so much harder and more difficult. And when you're growing, the people side of it shouldn't be your big headache. It should be, do I have the finances? Do I have the cash flow? Where do I find the clients? Where do I get the machinery? That kind of stuff, not the people side.
Yeah, not on the nuances there, because that definitely, and like you said, it's better to get the systems and structures in place while you're a little smaller. Then you're able to scale much more easily and less painfully, I would say.
Oh,
sure.
Absolutely. Because it's like building a house. If you've got a good foundation, then the rest, works.
For sure, definitely. So what do you wish more business owners understood about the cost of ignoring HR compliance? Because I think people just kind of go with it and maybe don't, I'll just figure it out later. It's like,
What they don't realize is how heavy the fines are. And I can give examples for various ones, but like, for example, an I-9 form, which most people don't know the name of it. It's the form that employees provide documentation to show that they're legally able to work in the U.S. They may say, but I've only got 2 people. What's the big deal? Well, if you don't do it, and they find out you didn't do it, each form is automatically a $5,000 fine.
Yeah, that's
because it's not completed at all.
Yeah, and $5,000 is a lot of money. I mean, definitely for small business, but for any business, you don't want to have to pay fines.
Absolutely.
Fines are not a good value add to your business, for sure.
Right, and it's per person. It's not total. Mm-hmm. So if you got 2 people, that's 10,000. If you've got 10 people, that's 50,000. You can see that the ROI for the government on that is quite high for the amount of time, because it takes them 5 minutes to figure it out, and they can levy these heavy fines.
Yeah, definitely.
The IRS does the same thing. If you misclassify somebody as an independent contractor when they should be an employee, I have seen, it was before I worked there, back in my corporate days, that they didn't do it correctly. They had to back pay not only the corporate taxes of the FICA and the state, they also had to pay back the employee portion. So they were liable now for both sides of the equation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And as we all know, the IRS loves to add this extra stuff about, I'm going to get the terms wrong, the fines and the
failure to file, failure to pay, all the different penalties they like to add on.
Penalties, yeah. And then they'll add in, well, you haven't paid for 3 years, so let me include, that timeline. It's
Yes.
The cost is unsustainable for a small business if it happens, So it's like, yes, does it? And they don't accept I didn't know as an answer.
No.
Yeah.
Ignorance is not an acceptable excuse when it comes to the IRS or the government. They're like,
not at all. They honestly, they don't care. They said you should have done the research. So worst case scenario, lack of compliance and so forth, that's what can happen. What typically occurs is when you don't comply, you may get disgruntled team members. You may have people on your team that aren't happy. They may understand that something is not quite right, and they get frustrated. They're not going to stick around. It'll cause turnover.
Right.
And I've had this happen to somebody before I started working with them, that the clients after a while said, how come every time I call you, I'm talking to somebody else?
Yeah.
What is the reflection now of you and your business when people call in or ask to speak to somebody and it's a revolving door of team members?
Yeah, that doesn't cut off a very good, stable environment for your customers or clients to deal with, for sure. And it's
right. If you can't keep people, how are you going to keep a client?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. So here's another thing that comes up, I think, often. Things like, we're too small to need HR or something along those lines. Do you, do you run across that often, or if there are other myths like that we should, discuss?
Yes, and my response to that is, you're right. You are too small for a full-time HR person. Now, what some people do is they'll have a quote-unquote HR person, somebody who's assigned HR responsibilities, maybe doesn't know it, but they're also the office manager, the accounts payable person, and oh, by the way, they run safety meetings, or some other. They're like the catch-all of things that nobody else is doing.
Right.
And
I'm likely not trained and they don't really, most of the time, know HR. It just happened to be here. Let's add this to your list of things to take care of, right?
Yes, and they think Google will give them all the answers. Yep. And yes, Google will give you answers, but how do you know they're the right ones?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
and just like anything else, you have to know the specifics. Like, every state is different. There's counties that are different. Cities that are different. It's a really intricate thing that you have to research, and you may get a blanket answer from Google about, nationally, or even about your state that still isn't quite right, maybe for where you're at in your state too. So.
Right, exactly. Because it doesn't, you may put in, I'm in Smallville, USA, but you don't put the county, so it doesn't pick up any county things. And another thing that people miss, because since the pandemic, the idea of remote work has exploded. Not everybody works in an office. And that's great. If it works for you, fantastic. That's great. That's how my team works. We're all remote. But what people miss is they'll think, oh, but I'm in this state, so I only have to follow this state's laws.
Right.
Which is for the people who live and work in that state is true. But if they are a remote employee working in a different state, you have to follow those laws because it's based on where the work is physically done.
Correct. Yep.
Not where the company is based.
Yeah, and that can get complicated quick if you got several people in several different states, et cetera. So for sure.
Absolutely. And if you're in a state that has minimal regulations, you may get surprised if all of a sudden you have an employee in one of the higher regulation states like California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I think especially if you're not in those states, you might be surprised by some of the requirements that they have in those states that have a lot more laws around employment and the requirements that are in place for sure. So,
yeah, and it's overwhelming because if you start doing a Google search, or even an AI search, because I know people do that now too,
right.
is it may, as because with accounting, there's what accounting principles are,
Mm-hmm.
the theory. It is something else to know how to practice it and how to incorporate it. So just because you understand the theory of what the law says, you may not know how to apply it or practice it or use it on a regular basis.
Yes, what
what does that
systems and
mean?
structures you need to put in place to make sure that you are retaining that compliance, whatever that law is looking for you to do. Definitely.
Absolutely,
So,
and
well, yeah,
it's a challenge.
I
I
think
get it.
so. I mean, I think definitely there's a huge need for an outsourcing of HR for small business. I think it's definitely something that small business should be looking at, like you said, because it can be a very expensive alternative, I guess, to not having that in place. So just like we say, outsource a lot of times your payroll because it's the same thing on payroll, like you said, payroll tax penalties, things like that. You want to outsource those types of things so that you have the expertise and the specialty being done by the expert, and you're not, and again, that also allows you and your business to free up from that responsibility. Either you're not doing it or not doing it well, or you're spending too much time on it and you're not doing things that you do well. So that's the other side of it. Like, what could you do to make sure that's being taken care of, but also spend your time growing your business, doing the things that you love to do and you do best. And because otherwise you're looking at kind of that opportunity cost too of trying to keep it in-house and, again, likely not getting the results anyways that you really need in your business. So that all being said, if businesses are looking at this outsourcing HR as a solution, can you kind of walk through, like, what does that look like in practice? How does that work?
What gets a little tricky is every company does it a little bit differently. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to focus on how we do it and how we present. We offer people basically two paths to outsource. One can be, I have a person that's internal that's handling it, but they just need somebody to call and ask questions to get support, like a human version of Google with accurate information than what they're searching. So we provide what's called a helpline. It's $100 a month. They can call, ask questions, get answers, but they basically handle it. Which is great for like smaller, if you've got maybe 5-10 people, maybe that's all you need. Now, once you start growing or you see a projection of growth that will maybe, you're like, in 3 years, I want to double in size. I've had people say that, and that's, as soon as they put it out in the universe, it seems to happen a lot faster. Once you see that you may be like on a growth trajectory, or maybe you're starting to get overwhelmed by the employee questions that they have. The team has got questions, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's. I don't want to say they're a distraction because it's your team and you want to take care of them, but it's the responsibility is taking up more of your time than you anticipated. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then it's good to have a full outsourced. And what I mean by full outsourced for us is that we give you a dedicated consultant that works with you and your team. They get to know you, and they get to know the people on the team. So much so that when we bring on a fully outsourced client, the consultant will take time to reach out to every person on the team and have like a 15, 20-minute call with them.
Oh, that's
So
great.
we don't get the, oh my gosh, HR called me, what's wrong? It's like, we just want to get to know you. We want to know what you like about there. It helps us set some priorities of what we can focus on, because compliance is the first thing we take care of with everybody. Then we start looking at culture. Let's take a look at your benefits. Let's take a look at performance. How do people know when they're doing great? How do they know when they're not? How do we, course correct and things like that? So you get that person, that takes that responsibility. And it's on a fractional basis. So they don't work with you full time. They could have 1, 2, or 3 other clients. So you get the expertise of somebody who's been doing it at least 15 years, which in the HR world means that in 15 years, you've seen it all. You can't really surprise us too much more after that.
Yeah.
And we can take care of it. Employees come to us directly. Managers, if they've got questions, or team leads, how does this work? They can come to us directly. And we set up, at least initially, weekly calls with the owner and CFO, or the fractional CFO, just because a lot of what HR does, has money attached to it. Yes. So they want the CFO online too, which I totally get. And we discuss about what's happening, what are the priorities, what are you, as a company, what are you trying to achieve so we can help you get there.
That's great. Yeah. So you're looking at the growth goals and things like that. Because like you said, I think people think HR and they mostly just think compliance. And I think that happens a lot with CPAs, compliance. And there is compliance. And yes, it is important. We talked about the penalties and the things that are negative about that too. And no one wants to be there. But there's so much more to it. Like you said, maybe they're struggling with attracting good employees, or they're, struggling with retaining them, or, you said, they're not giving good performance feedback. There's a lot of things that a seasoned HR professional on a fractional basis can add, to that, to just make the company stronger as a whole and help it achieve its goals, beyond just being in compliance with the rules and regulations and things like that.
Yeah, because we'll always look at compliance first, because our thought is, let's get that taken care of. And it typically can, depending on the size and the complexity, because if you're in an industry that requires certifications and professional licensures and things like that, we take a look at that as well and make sure everything's up to date. We do that first because our attitude is, if anybody from the alphabet soup of government comes knocking on your door, we want to make sure you're ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know you've got to answer the door, but we want to make sure we've got everything in place. For sure. And as you know, you only give them what they ask for. Don't give any extra.
Only exactly what they ask for. And sometimes I know in the audit world of the IRS, sometimes you give them even a little less than they ask for and see if they ask you for it again, depending on what they're asking for. Because sometimes they ask for the world, and you're like, oh, okay, let's start with this.
Let's start here and then go.
That experience, kind of what is expected. And I'm glad that you talked about that too, because you're, just think about how many small businesses, like you said, they all go through a lot of similar scenarios and situations, and they're all kind of recreating the wheel, right, to learn how to deal with that. But you guys bring that in the door, and it's quick, oh yeah, we've dealt with this before, and here's what you do. So.
Right, exactly. Like, for example, if there's an I-9 audit, they want to make sure that everybody who works for you is legally able to work. It's easy. Just take out your I-9 forms, nothing else. Mm-hmm. People are like, oh, I'll give them the employee files. No.
Yeah.
Just the I-9 forms. Yeah. Make sure that they're all complete, and I mentioned that if it's not complete, there's a huge fine. But they also look to make sure all the right boxes are ticked, that there's answers, that it's signed. It's done within 3 days. A lot of people forget that one. I-9 forms have to be done within 3 calendar days, not business days, calendar days.
Okay.
And so if all of that is in order,
to a Monday situation, right? You better do it right away.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's just give them that. They'll come in, they'll look at it. Will they try to find something? Yes, because they have to justify their visit. And, sorry, I know I can sound a little cynical, but if you've been doing this a long time, there's just certain things that will
crop up.
Trigger. But you should be fine. I mean, we've had clients go through like Department of Labor audits because somebody said, because people can report anonymously.
Right.
Somebody said you're not paying minimum wage, and you have tipped people. Get together all the information, because they don't just ask you for like the last paycheck. They ask you for the last 12 months, everybody who's still there or has left, and all this information. Then they go through it all and they're like, oh, okay, you're fine. But you've just spent 15 hours getting everything together,
Right.
just for them to be like, okay, you're fine. But there's some disgruntled person who's like, I made life a little bit more complicated for you.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Unfortunately, that definitely does happen. And like you said, you want to make sure that, you're in compliance ahead of time and you got all your ducks in a row. But either way, there is some level of business disruption, right, when those types of things happen.
Oh, yeah.
So it sounds like...
Right. And if you have an outsourced person, and we have access to things, like I said, I've done it remotely. I have gotten all the information together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Especially in this day and age where, I'm sure most of your clients, if they're not, when they come on, they probably move in that direction to getting, online in the cloud, whatever the case may be, so that they've got good access to those people that need access to files, and they're in a secured way. But then there's also, distributed, like you said, around the country, different people, so ways of handling that. But having those files there, and as well, it generally provides a good backup system too, right? Because when you've got those online systems, you're not gonna, your server doesn't go down and lose all the files or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You've got some good backups to keeping your records and files. So yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yeah, so we just try to make it easier for them, and I will tell you that we have found too that employees really like having an outside person. And here's something that a lot of business owners don't always get, because they'll be like, oh, but I'm a nice person. People can come talk to me. I always have my door open. It's like, yes, you do. And trust me, your people recognize that and see that. Mm-hmm. However, you've got title of owner, CEO, something like that. And if they express a concern about a business practice, about another employee, about a manager, whatever, a teammate, you still have control over their career.
Right. Their livelihood. Right.
Their livelihood. So while you may not be the person that would be retaliatory in any sense, it doesn't matter. In the back of their head is like, oh, but if they don't like what I say, they may try to fire me or they'll make my life difficult. Even if it's not true, it's just based on the title.
Yes. The title itself gives that is intimidating, even if you're not an intimidating person and you're an open person and those kinds of things. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. I've seen it happen over and over again, and to the nicest people. And it's like, yes, you're a nice person. People can come talk to you. But unfortunately, you've got these 3 letters after your name, CEO, it's going to cause people pause. So by having an outside person, they're like, okay, they're safe. They're neutral. I can talk to them, and they will either say, at least what we do, it's like, nope, we can keep this between ourselves, not an issue. Or depending on what you bring up, I'm like, okay, I have to we tell you ahead of time, I've got to talk to somebody else about this. Yeah. I have to discuss this with the CEO. Unfortunately, like sexual harassment, right. This is not something, I know you don't want to cause an issue. You don't want to cause a stir. However, one, you should never be uncomfortable at work. Right. We don't want that happening. Absolutely. 2, if it's happening to you, it could be happening to other people. Yeah. And we need to find out. Typically is. Yeah. And I find it's not usually people internally. It's people that come in from the outside that cause issues. And that could be clients, customers, vendors.
Okay.
Yeah. And 3, if they are working for us, or even if they come in here on a regular basis, I don't want that person around. So we want to save other people from experiencing what you are experiencing. So
and it's putting the business at risk too, right? I mean, that can become a much bigger problem, a lawsuit, all kinds of things can happen out of that. So
Yeah, just Google sexual harassment lawsuit outcomes, and if that doesn't scare you,
yeah.
so it's there's certain things that we can't keep confidential, and there's other things that we can. But by having a third party and us saying, yes, this can be confidential, or no, this can't be, we really need to do this, and we'll explain why.
Yeah.
And being a third party, we're just perceived as more being in everybody's best interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, even bringing up the confidentiality in general, I think that I've definitely had business owners that are really like having that outside party to, also kind of put that layer of separation and confidentiality in place. And especially in a smaller business, even if you're, looking to have an HR person, they're kind of like a lone silo all by themselves, right? And they have all this information and all these types of things. And that can be challenging as well. And sometimes the owners don't, want their employee who's HR knowing certain things or what have you. So it's nice to have that kind of outside person and perspective too.
Right, and it does, because like if an owner sees a potential downturn in business, and they want somebody to think it through with, but they look at their team and they're like, I don't want to scare anybody,
right? Mm-hmm.
But so, and I'm sure you get this too. They talk to the CFOs, they talk to the outside HR person of like, how would this work? What are my options? Does it go this way? Does it go that way?
Yep.
And we can talk that through, or we're not going to be like, oh my gosh, my job's on the line. It's like, right. No, it's okay. Right. We're here to help you and to support you and all the rest.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. So,
yeah.
All right. So let's see if we can turn our attention to some practical tips for business owners that they can kind of take away with them and listening to this. So what would you say the top 3 things every business should have in place to stay compliant as they grow?
The biggest things are, find out what federal and state laws you're responsible for. And you can actually sign up for updates from state agencies or federal agencies, or if you work with an attorney, they may be able to say, oh yeah, we have an employment law attorney that does send out updates every once in a while. I know we, as Focus HR, we send up legal updates. We're not attorneys, but we send them out so people know what's coming and what's happening. Mm-hmm. So get on some kind of an email list for that.
Yeah, because that's probably the biggest thing that I see is changes that people didn't realize something changed too. That happens a lot.
Yeah, so, and sometimes it's a subtle change. It's like it didn't seem like that big, but I can give you lots of examples, but they're very state specific. But so you have to keep in mind, like even now in the federal government, there's always changes with administration. Regardless of which, side of the aisle you're on, each administration always makes changes. Yep. And the Department of Labor has reverted back to an old test for independent contractors. The difference between independent contractor and employee. And, people are getting confused by this. And I'm like, well, let's look at this in the strictest view. Mm-hmm. Because Department of Labor has one criteria, the IRS has another criteria, unemployment, workforce development, whatever your state calls that, because I've noticed every state's got a different name for that.
Yep.
They have a different criteria of who applies for that. So what we can do is we look at it and say, okay, let's talk about, and for us, there's one big test. Are they doing what your business does? And I know that sounds kind of weird, but for example, your CFOs, you have a fractional CFO firm, right, and you're going to have accountants and CFO type people working for you,
right,
because that is what your firm does. Those people can never be independent contractors because it is your main business.
Right.
Yep. So the same goes with, therapy practices or doctor's offices, manufacturing. The person in production, has to be an employee,
Mhm.
things like that. And every once in a while they get, oh, but so-and-so says they don't want to be employee. They only want to be an independent contractor.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'm like, well, that's nice. Um, I'm not going to start speculating, although I've got a few ideas on why that is.
Mhm.
However, that puts you as a company at risk.
Right.
Because we talked about that. If you don't pay your taxes, comes the IRS. If they're saying that they should have been an employee, comes Department of Labor. You terminate that contract, and now they're going to go to unemployment saying, well, I was an employee because I was treated as one, so I should still get it. So
Right.
in reality, you haven't escaped anything,
Mhm. Yeah.
so when in doubt, make them an employee. Does it cost a little bit more? Yeah, you know as well as I do. It's about 10 to 15% more depending on your state, and
Right.
the tax codes that you have to follow. But it's a heck of a lot cheaper than what could happen further on down the
100%.
road. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Definitely.
so
Um,
the other things I would say that people need to know about, because I see it popping up more and more in different states, is find out what your state or county or city, because there's California and Illinois and New York, I think, um, have statewide county and city laws as far as
Yep.
time off,
Right.
whether
Oh, yeah.
it's sick
Mhm.
time or vacation time, paid, any kind of paid leave that
Mhm.
is required by your state. Stay on top of that, because trust me, your team knows,
Yeah.
so
Mhm. Yeah.
take a look at that. As much as I would love for any of these legislative entities to actually talk to small businesses about how to apply these laws to make it in a way that makes sense and easy to manage,
Yeah.
they don't.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of workaround that needs to be
Yeah.
done. And uh, I don't run into this too often, but I still do sometimes where people do their own payroll, like through spreadsheets.
Oh, oh my.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, exactly. Um, I've seen that. I'm like, don't. The liability of filing your taxes wrong at the wrong time, the wrong way, or anything. You can get payroll programs, HRIS type programs at a
Mhm.
very affordable cost,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it's
Yeah,
worth the
definitely.
investment.
Yeah, for sure. And the time too. I mean, to do everything manually like that. I mean, even if you're using a built spreadsheet, that's still a lot of time that you're putting in and whatnot. If
Oh
you're
yeah,
using a
and
system that's built for it, it's much more efficient for sure. So yeah.
and those systems, if they file late and it's not due to anything that, because you didn't give them a number or whatever, it's strictly their fault. They
Yep.
pay the penalties for it to be late.
Right. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
assume that responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about having to say,
Yep.
okay, somebody else needs to do
Not my
it.
problem.
Not my problem.
Nice. Very good. Awesome. Very cool. Okay. All right. So let's see what else we had on our outline here that we might be able to cover. So I think I just wanted to kind of revisit. You said kind of towards the beginning, like what's a good point where businesses can look to add HR? It sounds like really if you are adding an employee, you can add like the at least the lowest level HR that you guys provide, which is like that helpline, like at least someone they can
Yeah.
go to when they need help, when they need to make sure they're doing things correctly. And then, beyond that, if I recall correctly, you're saying when you get kind of beyond that 8 to 10 employee figure, that's kind of where you really should be looking at a fractional HR solution that's more full-time type situation, but again, not a full-time person that you're paying. It's a more cost-effective fractional experienced HR. Did I summarize
Yeah,
that correctly?
absolutely. Yeah. And it's, I always look at it from the point of view of the business owner or the CEO. Whenever they start feeling overwhelmed by everything they have to do that's HR related, that's when to bring us in.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
you're seeing messages that are scaring you, or it's taking up a lot of your time and you have to do a lot of research, if you're paying attorneys for human resource advice, please talk to us. We are a much more reasonable investment than an attorney.
Yeah,
Um, Attorneys have their place, but
absolutely.
It's, when you're looking at your finances, you want to be reasonable about it. And just to give people an understanding of when you would need a full-time person in the HR world, the industry standard is you don't need a full-time HR person typically until you get 100 employees.
Okay, that's a good metric to know.
Yeah. So, unless you've got something that's very complicated and it needs a lot of time and effort, typically at around that 100 point is when you start needing a full-time. Because we've had people say, well, we have 50, we need somebody full-time. I'm like, no, because a good HR person is going to get bored after a while. Yeah. They may come in, they'll clean things up, they'll put in some formalities, some processes, get everything going.
Yeah. Then it's going to be, they're going to be sitting on their hands half the time or whatever because they don't have anything to do.
Exactly. And they won't stick around because they're not going to be challenged anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, great. Well, it's been a lot of great information and advice. And I think it's an area that obviously a lot of business owners deal with, struggle with, have concerns about. So I'm glad we had this conversation to kind of help shed some light on those types of things. So if someone's listening and they're curious about Focus HR, what's the best way to connect with you or Focus HR and get some more information?
Sure. Well, obviously our website is a great resource to take a look at what we do, how we do it, and that's focushr.biz. Or they can write to me directly at andrea@focushr.biz, or feel free to give me a call, and that's my phone numbers on my website too.
Great. Yeah. And we'll have all that too in the show notes as we link in all the links and whatnot. So you guys can, if you're driving or walking or somewhere you don't have a pen, write things down.
Yeah, exactly.
You can visit the podcast, see the show notes, and we'll have all that information there as well. So I think that's pretty much a wrap, unless you have any final thoughts or things you'd like to share, but I think you covered it pretty well.
Yeah, just remember we're here to make it easier for you, like you mentioned at the beginning, we uncomplicate the people side of business, and that is really what we're looking to do, and making sure you have a place where people want to work and they'll stick around.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Andrea, for joining us today. It was really great to see you again, and looking forward to continuing to work with you in the future as well. So, all right. Keep that momentum going, and we will see you next time, everybody.